Welcome to part 1 of 3 of the first week of material and taking a look at nutrients and how they're used in the animal's body and the role they play. As well, we're talking a little bit about how we evaluate nutrients. The specific objectives for these 3 videos that you'll be watching about nutrients is to define nutrition and what nutrients are. We're going to take a look at the 6 classes of nutrients and also describe their basic functions and roles they play in the animal's body. We're going to define energy and how we measure energy and how we describe energy in animal nutrition. And we're also going to outline and define the key measures of various nutrients and how we estimate them in livestock feeding or animal feeding. First thing we need to do is take a look at some key terms that we need to understand. The first of which is nutrition. And according to Webster's dictionary, nutrition is the sum of the processes by which an animal or plant takes in and utilizes food substances. When we talk about animal feeding, we are basically trying to get food substances. In this case, we're going to be talking about the term a nutrient, and getting them into the animal's body. This includes digestion, absorption, and metabolism of these food substances to be able to support life. When we talk about those food substances from Webster's dictionary, that's a nutrient. And a nutrient is a chemical that supports life. Whether it's milk production, growth, general health and well-being, those are critical. And we have certain nutrients that an animal requires to be able to promote healthy and productive lives. There are 6 classes of nutrients that we're going to be working with, and this is common for all species. You guys have probably seen this list many times. The first is carbohydrates, fats or lipids, proteins, minerals, vitamins, and water. The first 3 supply energy to the animal. Their metabolism and their breakdown of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins function to supply energy. It's important to note that energy is not a nutrient. It is supplied by nutrients. So make sure that that's a clear distinction. Even though we talk about energy requirements of animals, energy itself is not a nutrient, but it's a property of these nutrients. However, it is still critical for animals to be able to grow, develop, and function. We'll start with talking about water. Water is probably one of the most overlooked nutrients, and it's the easiest to make sure animals' needs are met. Water is critical. Many of you guys probably are aware that an animal, including humans, can survive longer without food as opposed to water. The reason is water is critical in digestion, nutrient transport, removing waste from the body, temperature regulation, cell metabolism, all sorts of different things. And without water, cell function can diminish rapidly. And so water, while very, very important, probably one of the most important nutrients, we don't spend a lot of time on because it's easiest to make sure their needs are met by supplying free choice water at all times. The water requirements can vary by quite a bit, and some examples of things that can affect how much water an animal needs is the species, the type of diet they're on. If they are on a high moisture diet, such as fresh pasture compared to a dry feed, they won't need as much water and consume as much free water. The environment. Just think about how much water you consume during the summertime as opposed to the wintertime, or in a drier climate as opposed to a humid climate. Definitely can affect water intake. The stage of the life cycle. An animal that's lactating is going to require more water than animals that are not. The next nutrient we're going to talk about is probably the largest class of nutrient of the 6 classes, probably one of the largest that has an impact on animal feeding. Carbohydrates make up over 80% of the livestock rations, and animals are getting carbohydrates from plants. We know the process of photosynthesis in which plants utilize nutrients and sunlight to be able to make and store carbohydrates. And that's what we're feeding most of these plants to our animals for, is to get to these carbohydrates. They serve as a source of energy in our animal diets and or even bulk, meaning fiber, or they take up space. And they generally are the best value per unit of energy of our feedstuffs. As I mentioned before, animals don't have a requirement for carbohydrates, they have a requirement for energy. But understand that energy is not the nutrient, carbohydrates are. There are two different types of carbohydrates that we utilize in animal feedings. The first is starch or sugars. The second is fiber. Starches and sugars examples are in cereal grains, roots and tubers like potatoes, radishes, parsnips, stuff like that. They are generally easily digested, usually are more energy dense because of their ease of digestion than fiber. Fiber is the components of the cell wall of the plant. And that includes cellulose, hemicellulose, some of the pectins and gums. The problem with fiber is that it does require microbial digestion. So this is why the herbivores, such as non-ruminant herbivores like horses, or the ruminant herbivores like cows or sheep, they have those large microbial populations that will help them digest fiber. But regardless of the type of carbohydrate we're dealing with, whether it's starch or fiber, all of them have a sugar, usually glucose, as the subunit. And once we get it broken down into that single sugar, it behaves similarly in the body. Protein is found in the highest concentration of all nutrients in the body. It's got the most biological functions in the body. And proteins are simply chains of these compounds called amino acids that are linked together to serve a very specific function. The challenge from an animal feeding standpoint, in order for animals to build proteins, they have to have the amino acids in the diet to build with. Proteins can vary in what we call solubility, which is very important in digestion. Some proteins are more digestible than other ones. As we talk about these amino acids, there's two general categories of amino acids that we have to consider. The first is the non-essential amino acids. This means that an animal's tissue can make these amino acids in a large enough quantity that can be useful in the animal's body. This second column is some of the non-essential amino acids. In contrast to that, the essential amino acids are ones that cannot be synthesized in the body and must be supplied in the animal's diet. And these are the first column is the essential amino acids. The asterisk is actually taurine is important for cats. Otherwise, it's not an essential amino acid for most of the other species. The three that are in bold print, lysine, methionine, and tryptophan, are what we consider the first limiting amino acids. Make a note, you will need to know the 10 essential amino acids for animals. It is important to understand the difference between non-ruminant and ruminant species. The non-ruminant species, because they do not have that microbial population, they cannot synthesize some of the essential amino acids, specifically lysine, methionine, and tryptophan. And so we need to have those supplied in the diet. In contrast, because the ruminants have that microbial population before the primary site of digestion, we talked about what the term pregastric means, they can benefit from the microbes making amino acids. And so in ruminants, we evaluate protein based upon its degradability. And when we talk about degradability, we're talking about what can be used by the bugs or not used by the bugs. There are a couple different terms for degradable protein. You will see either DIP, degradable intake protein, or RDP, rumen degradable protein. For the undegradable protein that's not used by the bugs or the microbes, you will see two terms, UIP, undegradable intake protein, or RUP, rumen undegradable protein. The terms DIP and UIP are used in beef cattle, and RDP and RUP are used in the dairy, but they are comparable terms. This wraps up the first part of the three-part series on nutrients and their metabolism.